This is not the story of a hero, nor is it the tale of good over evil. It's the story of death, pain, rebirth, and annihilation. It is the story of our world, our history, written in time long before the hands of the clock began to move. Time changes us, however it is a constant, and those who defy time defy the very tyranny of the stars, bringing forth entities that live within the folds of the universe itself. Beautiful, dreadful, and deceiving. Like dominoes pushed from the end, events toppling over one another, eventually leading to only one possible outcome. However, this is not where our story begins.
Please tell me that's you. Oh, Raptor.
I remember that night, the sounds of the night-dwelling creatures surrounding me as I walked a well-traveled, yet lonely path. Along with those sounds came a breeze that stung my hands and bit at my ears, the sensation sending pins and needles deep into my bones, making it difficult to keep a grip on what little I had taken with me. After walking for hours in the freezing embrace of night, I felt great relief when I could see lights ahead, soft shimmers peeking through the trees, urging me to move more quickly as my body begged to be warm again. I'd come to the edge of the city limits, and didn't hesitate to walk through the old wooden door and into the tavern that dwindled just on the outskirts, quickly making my way over to the fireplace that burned fiercely in the corner of the room. Immediately I dropped the bag on my shoulder and to the ground and crouched down, outstretching my hands to the edges of the flames and moving my fingers as they licked at my palms, beginning to feel the feeling in my hands returning. It's at this point I realized that the cold may have been the only thing keeping me awake, as with that warmth came a weight in my eyes that only grew heavier with every passing moment. Reluctantly, I got up and walked away from the fireplace, making my way over to the bar where I sat heavily down on one of the stools, hoping to drench what the cold remained in my core with strong drink before I made my way back outside. Behind the counter was a thick barkeep who didn't even acknowledge my existence as he was busy cleaning. With it being so late and I being the only customer in his establishment, it was clear he was preparing to close for the night. "Excuse me, sir. Could you please pour me a mug of ale? I won't be long." "Beat it. We're closed." "Come now. I understand the circumstances. However, I am of noble blood, and I'd be more than willing to pay extra for your services." "You're not hearing me, boy? I said we're closed. Only a madman would stay open knowing what roams in these nights. So screw off with you." I sighed out of annoyance, watching as the man still didn't even give me a glance. I held my tongue, got back up, walking over, grabbing my bag, slinging it back over my shoulder, and beginning to make my way back out the door. The moment the door shut behind me, I could hear the barkeep lock it, muttering something strewn with profanity before his heavy footsteps walked away. I couldn't help but feel bitter, wanting nothing more to tell him to kiss the king's hind end for his rude introduction to the town registro. However, at the moment, I was more concerned with getting to an inn and putting the entirety of the day behind me, trading the stress and aggravation for a warm bed and a good night's rest. I began my walk again as I saw the lights that once guided me beginning to go out, the town itself resting and turning silent. The night may not have given me much comfort, however I had no fear for it. Most people would rather retreat behind doors once the sun went down for fear of robbers and creatures that roam the night. But I wasn't one to bend to the threat of a fight. In those days I could care less of the consequences of my own choices, or the crimes of opportunity that loomed from a young nobleman traveling the dark alone. Before I could even make it halfway to the nearest inn, I could hear footsteps behind me, no doubt emerging from one of the many alleyways that lined the cracking of these cobblestone structures. I stopped in my tracks, turning to meet my stalker. "Can I help you?" He didn't respond, at least not at first, his beady eyes looking me up and down, scanning me in detail before his eyes finally met mine. "You Kain?" "Who's asking?" I snapped, my hand drifting down to the hilt of my sword, grasping the cold steel tightly. He seemed to almost enjoy seeing me put my guard up, and made no attempt to move away from me after I had. That crest on your hilt is telling enough. Dark hair, green eyes, dressed in royal armor, and I can only imagine how much coin you've got on you." He spoke with a tone that seemed to reflect his ill intentions, and as he did, others emerged from the dark. Slowly they approached, at least 5 in total, all armed with blades of their own, drawn and hungry for blood. I looked around me and quickly withdrew my sword as I was surrounded in the narrow street, readying myself for the inevitable outcome of this encounter. "If it's money you seek, then you can have it. I do not wish to fight over mere coin." "No, that is only our tip after all this is done. We've already been paid, and bringing back your head should let our buyer know that he spent his generous amounts of coin well," he said as he withdrew a blade of his own, taking a step in my direction as I glanced around once more, seeing his men follow suit. I couldn't help but feel some sense of pride, knowing that they'd sent so many just to dispose of me, but that didn't stop my heart from racing for the same reasons. "Fine, you want my head? Then come and take it from me before I'd have a chance to mount yours on my blade." He grinned at that, and as soon as the words left my mouth, he, along with his men, made their move. All charged in at once. However, the one on my left had made it first, raising his blade with the intent of cutting me down before his nose met the hard butt of my sword, staggering him back. The next came from behind, and I swung my sword high to come crashing down at him, watching the spray of sparks and blood as my blade crashed down over his face and grazed his armor. The one I had previously hit, with now blood spewing from his nose and into his mouth like the maw of an open river, recovered quicker than I expected, grabbing my sword arm as the other from my other side grabbed me as well. I abruptly stomped my boot heel down into his ankle, hearing him scream in pain as he loosened his grip, giving me just enough room to connect my elbow with his face before getting my sword arm free and slashing him across the throat. The spray of blood temporarily blinded me as I struggled to regain my bearings, but I had no time to do even that as the man who had originally confronted me charged in, wrapping his arms around my waist and driving me to the ground. My sword flew from my hand as the wind was knocked out of me, and I struggled to get him off as he threw a blow to my jaw. I could already taste my own blood pooling in my mouth as if a tooth had cracked. But I quickly returned the favor, kneeing him hard in the stomach. The moment he was stunned, I flipped onto my stomach, scrambling for my sword, but once again I was beat down hard to the ground as I was kicked in my ribs. Once more I felt something break, a stream of blood and shooting pain erupting from my side as the man whose face was now mangled from both the hilt of my sword and the elbow of my armor swung back and kicked me again. I had nothing more than fabric between the sections of my plated armor, and he seemed to notice that as he kicked in once more, again and again, making me spit blood and gasp for air as I thrashed on the ground. I made one final attempt to grab my blade, however it proved useless, as it was kicked away from me. I had not the strength to reach it. I lay there on the ground, broken and bloody as the two stood over me, the presumed leader and his bleeding lackey struggling to catch their breath as mine was all but leaving me. Finish this, now, before the guards come looking, the leader said, and I glanced up to see the other reach down and take my sword in hand. The leader had walked away from me, growing smaller down the street as the other behind me walked in and out of view. It wasn't long before I felt the knee pressed against my back and the cold sting of my own steel sword as it was driven through my armor and down into my chest, slicing and obliterating any flesh or organ that was in its path. So much blood came from my mouth that I could hardly breathe. However, in that moment, I let out a scream that no man, no god could ignore. A last final cry of pain. The cold, followed by blackness, came. However, in that blackness, someone, or rather something, heard my cry. When I finally opened my eyes again, I had no idea how I'd gotten there, but I had a pretty good idea of where I was. I was met with an endless pit below me, and from down in that pit spewed hot red flames that licked at my skin as though they were just itching to grab a hold of me and pull me down in. I stood upright facing the fiery abyss as my hands were tightly chained to two posts at either side of me, firmly holding me in my servitude. As I looked down, I was met with my own bloody reflection in the very blade that had taken my life. My blade. The blade that was now firmly lodged in my chest, and all of its pain there with it. This was hell. This was my eternal torment for the wrong I had committed. A wrong I had been seeking to right, but failed as the time to do so was stolen from me. No matter how hard I tried, no matter how hard I pulled and thrashed, I could not free from the bonds that bound me. I could not free myself from this place. And I knew no mortal man ever would, as until now the prospect, or rather the threat of its existence, was nothing more than words in a book, written long before any man's time. I don't know how long I was there. It could have been years for all I knew. But after a time, I felt someone place their hand on my shoulder. I quickly looked up, but didn't see anyone. But as I looked over to see who was behind me, I was only met with shadow. Deep and fearful. Fear not, Kain. I mean you no harm. A deep, wisp-like voice spoke, and I could feel this thing grab the sword in my chest, quickly pulling it out as my back arched from the pain, and I once more cried out, the shock only serving to make me throw up blood that boiled on contact with the stone floor at my feet. Oddly, I didn't seem to be bleeding out. No clouding of the mind came from such a wound. Only an eternal stream of deep red pouring from my body in an endless and painful reminder of my suffering. Next, my wrists were unshackled, and I would have fallen into the pit below if it weren't for whoever it was, wrapping his arms around my shoulders and gently dragging me back. Once I was set down on the ground, the a man came to face me. I realized that this was not a man at all, but a foul-looking creature, its chest nothing more than a maw of curled ribs that were strung together like sharp teeth, its face holding the fractured remnants of a cracked and long-bleached skull, however black cloth was draping over the rest of its body, hiding itself. He crouched down, extending his decaying hand, at which I quickly brushed it away from me. Relax, child. I am nothing like those that sent you to this place. No, you're not. You're a demon that dwells in the shadows of death, and I will have no counsel with the likes of you. Truly. Even one that would offer you a chance at that which you seek. And how as you know what I seek? The creature stood, looking down at me with his withered form. I have seen the fire burn in the eyes of many men, a fire that is sparked by the cruelty of the unjust. They are the same flames that now dance in your eyes. He spoke, extending his hand down to me once more. They are the flames of revenge. His words struck truth. The anger I had felt had grown into a raging inferno, a blaze I wanted to turn my enemies to ash with. After a brief moment of contemplation, I reached out to take his hand, accepting his aid in getting me to my feet. You seem to know me, but what should I call you? I am known as Mortanius, he spoke, giving me a slight bow. Member of the Circle of Nine, and guardian to the Pillar of Death. If you accept my offer, I will gladly return you to the land of the living to act out whatever revenge you see fit. And what would this offer be? I asked, truly wondering what use I could be to such a being as one of the Nine. In return, I will require your assistance with a matter in the living world. A simple, favor, if you will. One you will be more than capable of handling. Sometimes, your life comes to a series of desperate and horrible decisions. The necromancer Mortanius had offered me the chance to get back at my assassins, to seek out the revenge I craved. And like a fool, I jumped on his offer without considering the cost. Nothing is free. Nothing is so simple, not even a choice. Everything has a cost, and I was about to pay the heavy toll of mine. With my blade still in hand, Mortanius turned it to me, offering it back. And as I gripped it, I could feel an energy unlike any other I had felt. It swelled inside of me. I could feel it coursing through my veins like a rapture of lightning. The deal was struck. The last thing I remember was walking over the chasm of flames, their heat never touching me, and my body never falling to the ground below. It's as though the flames themselves were fueling my intentions, a living being that now breathed the same breath as my own, guiding me, empowering me, driving me on the straight path forward. The next thing I knew was I was waking up in the dark. I went to sit up, only to strike my head on something above me. I winced in pain, but barely had enough room to even reach my forehead, my movement completely restricted. I could feel my sword laying over my chest. I was still dressed in armor, but couldn't get any more details than that. It was becoming difficult to breathe as I placed my hands on the wood above me and began to push. I strained, feeling like I was trying to move a boulder as the wood groaned and protested to my attempts to break free. With what little room I had, I coiled back and punched upwards, feeling the wood beginning to give as debris fell on my face. I repeatedly slammed my fist into it, over and over until I heard the wood split and crack, chunks of dirt falling into my mouth. I quickly realized I was underground, beginning to pull away at the wood, struggling to make a space large enough for me to fit through and begin digging my way upwards through the soil, holding my breath as to not get any more of the debris in my lungs. My hand finally broke the surface, and I clambered out of the hole, throwing my sword aside as I rolled onto my back, taking in large breaths of air. The air itself, though, was offensive, stale and earthy, with hints of moisture and death coming in wafts that made my stomach lurch. I wiped the dirt from my face and looked around, seeing long dead wall sconces that were hinged to the unfinished stone, along with coffins that lined the walls, and offerings left by the feet of epitaphs. It became apparent that I was in the city mausoleum, and even more apparent that I had just dug my way out of my own fresh grave. I slowly sat up, feeling over my chest where my sword once was, and at this time I realized something was very, very wrong. The sound of my hand touching over my chest brought soft clinks of metal, my fingertips not even reaching the armor. I held my hands in front of me, studying them, seeing the sharp claws that now tipped my fingers and the pale color of my skin. I felt along my face, then up to my hair, feeling things I no longer recognized as my own. My hair was trailing down over my shoulders in white wafts, and with that I quickly grabbed my blade to look into its reflection. What I saw wasn't me. It couldn't be. I looked so starkly different from what I knew, and yet I also knew that the reflection was my own. A pair of vaguely orange eyes stared back at me, my face and body now lupine, and with that wolf-like appearance came a craving I'd never known. I dropped my blade by my side and held my stomach, a harsh burning sensation irradiating from my core that made me feel weak. I stuck my blade in the ground and used it to help me stand, staggering over to the nearest archway and bracing myself on it, still clutching my stomach tightly. I could see light up ahead and began slowly making my way towards it, exiting this dreary place, rising again, like that of the sun. The sun no longer gave me any comfort, having to quickly shade my eyes as I stepped into it. It was hard to see, my eyes completely blinded by rays of unfathomable brightness, and a slight ringing in my head following it. I could hear something, a voice, someone coming to me. However, I was so disoriented that I couldn't tell where. "Sir, good sir, are you all right?" I could hear the panic in his words, the worry for me, and I tried to make my way closer to the sound, however, only stumbling down the stone steps and into this person's arms. At the very least, I was grateful that he caught me. "Oh, now, take it easy, sir. You look like death." "Pain? Hey, it's all right now. I've got you. Come, let's sit you down." His words spoke kind, but I had to wonder what he thought of me. Perhaps that I was a drunk who'd stumbled into the cemetery, or perhaps a degenerate who lost his way. I suppose, in a way, he'd be right about that. I kept my eyes closed as he guided me over to the shade, setting me down by the side of his carriage. "There you are. Just wait a moment. I'll get you something to drink." "Thank you," I muttered, regaining myself now that I was out of the light, rubbing my eyes, trying to focus. After a moment, the gentleman came back to me, handing me a water bag. I took it, feeling the dryness in my throat and being desperate to quench it. However, as I opened it, something stopped me from bringing it to my lips. Something didn't feel right. A strange aversion and fear taking over me, something screaming at me as though I were about to drink poison. I sighed and handed it back to him. "I'm not thirsty." "Are you sure? You genuinely look like you could use it." "No," I said, closing the bag tightly before now casting it away from me, that fear only building. "Sir, please. I only mean to help. You can help me by getting that thing the fuck away from me." "Don't be stubborn now, son. It's only water." He spoke as he picked up the bag and extended it to me again, and I quickly slapped it away. "I said no!" I yelled as I swatted at it. However, my claws extended through my anger, and I cut the bag wide open. The water sprayed over my hand and up my arm, simple water acting like acid as I recoiled and screamed, grabbing my burning flesh. The man quickly grabbed my shoulders, confused and blinded to what I had become as he tried to calm me down, but through the pain, a new sensation took over me. I smelled the air and looked at the man's hand that was now bleeding from my outburst. The smell of his blood saturating my senses with primal instinct. His previous concern and care for me flashed to fear as his eyes met mine. My vision ringed in red as his emotion had no effect on my own. Quicker than I even knew I could move, I reached out and clasped my hand tightly around his neck, opening my mouth and feeling my teeth extend as I plunged them deep into the base of his neck. He thrashed and fought back against me, his screams for help falling on deaf ears as I forced him to the ground, letting the animalistic urges take over as I drained him. His blood brought an instant relief and pleasure from the moment it touched my lips, and I found it impossible to stop once this had started. It fed from him long after his heart had given out, not being able to pull away until the blood flow itself had stopped. I sat back, wiping my mouth as I took in the sense of relaxation and euphoria, any and all pain leaving my body, the haze in my mind now gone. However, as I looked down, seeing the man on the ground, realization hit. By the gods, what have I done? I asked myself, regret sinking in as I reached up and felt over my fangs, seeing the fresh blood on my hands. Seems as though you're getting the hang of this. The voice made me jump, and I looked up to see Mortanius standing next to me, appearing like a looming storm on the wind. You bastard! What have you done to me? I was simply giving you that which you asked for, the strength to take your revenge. You spoke again before looking down at me. You were right to avoid the water. A shame, really, that vampires have such an aversion to it. So that's what you've done. You made me this creature of the night. Goddamned parasite. You're alive, are you not? And you call this living? Forced to hide from the Order? He chuckled at that, looking back over at the horizon. The Seraphan Order will not know you. In fact, most still believe you dead. And thus, you are free to walk the streets. For now. I got back up, brushing myself off and staying within the shadow of the carriage, wanting to speak, but not before the necromancer spoke first. You should seek out the tavern you visited when you first came to this place. I believe you will find what you are looking for there. And I would hurry. I can smell rain on the wind. I looked up, and sure enough, he was speaking the truth. Dark clouds beginning to swirl in the north. And what of you? I asked. But once I had turned back, he was already gone. I looked around for a moment, then down at the corpse at my feet. He was an older man, more than likely a farmer who'd been on his way into town to sell his goods. I narrowed my eyes and knelt down, using my claws to rip the red shirt from his torso. Thank you for your life, old man. It won't be wasted, I said as I wrapped the fabric around my head and mouth, shielding myself from the light as I made my way to the front of the carriage, unhooking the horse from it and climbing onto its bare back. Reins in hand, I pulled my makeshift cloak further over my eyes, seeing the road before me. I took a moment to admire the pillars of fate in the distance. Even now in death, I found them to be magnificent. A beautiful landmark that dotted Azathoth with its inspiring beauty as it reached up to the sky like a great hand stretching to the gods. A shame that Azathoth itself was akin to the rot back in the mausoleum comparatively. I wondered if I would ever see them through the same eyes again. With a call to move and a crack of the reins, I was off, heading back into town and back to my place of death.